Hi everybody, Ed Skorsky here from Bring Back the Memory. Today we're going to do a video which is going to be one of a series of videos on collecting stock certificates. Okay, now the first thing we want to do is just review why somebody would want to collect stock certificates. And there's four main reasons. The first reason is strictly for enjoyment, and that goes for anything you collect. If you're not interested in it and you don't like it, really no reason to collect it, so that goes without saying. So the second reason I think would be for the education and for the experience, the enjoyment of learning. So every stock certificate tells a story about the people who bought it, the people who sold it, a story about the company that it represents. And it's really enjoyable to study the history of these companies. So that's the second reason. The third reason for collecting stock certificates would be for the artwork. And I'm just going to show you a certificate here. And most of the certificates have a picture, and this is called the vignette, and it's metallically engraved in the stock certificate. Now, with a stock certificate, remember, if you have a stock certificate addressed to you, it means that you have ownership in a company. So these were metallically engraved, just like in currency, because if you have this certificate, it's proof that you own the company, and when it comes time to trade it in, you turn in this certificate, and they give you money. And they don't want to give you the money if you're not the rightful owner. And that's why these certificates are engraved just like currency is. Okay. And then finally, the last reason to collect stock certificates, and again, this is for some people, would be as an investment. Now, you may or may not make money doing this. Some certificates will go up in value, some certificates won't. But there's a good possibility that if you buy it at a good price, you then can turn around and sell it later on, and you can make some money on it. So that would be the fourth reason. So now the thing is, what are we going to talk about today? Well, what I did was I picked three certificates to talk about, and each one of these I picked for a different reason. But the reasons, what I try to do is pick why would somebody collect each of these, and that's what I'm going to try to explain in the certificate. Now, the first certificate is the one I held here, and this is a certificate from the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. The reason I picked this first is because it's the first railroad company in the United States of America, dating all the way back to 1830. Now, if you think about it, what was it like before railroads were invented? Now, let's say you were a person living in, before 1830, living on the East Coast, and you decided that, well, life is okay on the East, but we want to move out, start a life anew, and maybe get a farm, get a ranch, whatever. You hear stories how good the land is in the West, and maybe you can start a new life, settle down on a farm or a ranch, right? Now, to do that, your trip is probably going to be a one-way trip, and it's going to take you a long time, and it's pretty dangerous. Now, that was before the railroads came into practice. Now, since the railroads, everything changed. Now, get on a train and you can go anywhere you want, and you can come back whenever you want. It's not the same as today when we had airplanes, but still, you can tell the difference between, going out and taking a trip on a train as opposed to wagon train or going out by horse, something like that. Okay, so that's the certificate. Now, again, for going back to the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, since it is the first railroad company, the first commercial railroad company in the United States, that's the one I picked first. Now, also, there's a very historical importance to this company. And for this, we'll go back to the Civil War. The Civil War took place in the 1860s, and at that time, the president of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was a person by the name of John Work Garrett. Now, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was controlled by the Union Army. Okay, it was part of the Union Army, and it was considered very, very important and crucial to the victory that the Union had over the Confederacy. After the war was over, President Lincoln commended John Work Garrett for everything that he had done to help the Union win the war. Another person who was influential and one of the people who operated the railroad was Johns Hopkins. And you know of him from Johns Hopkins University, Johns Hopkins Hospital. All right, so now, the thing is, this certificate I'm holding right here, this is a very common certificate. This was a very big railroad. and there were millions of certificates issued. Now, as far as the price, you could buy the certificate for a couple dollars. Very easy to get because it's a pretty common one. Now, I also have another certificate, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. This is a little bit different. This one is signed by John Work Garrett, the president of the railroad, and it's also initialed by Johns Hopkins. It's from 1879, and John Work Garrett was the president of the railroad for quite a long time. So because it's got his signature on it, and because it's got Johns Hopkins initials, this one is worth quite a bit more than the first one that I showed you. Now, as far as the vignette, if you look at this, this is much older than the first one that I showed you, but the neat thing about this is this one is a steam engine, so I'm going to go back to this one right here. This one has a vignette of the original Tom Thumb engine. That was the engine that was on the first locomotive when it first started back in 1830. And you can see it looks almost like a toy, but yet it did the job. Okay, so that's the first railroad, Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, and its importance is nationally for everybody in the country because of the importance of it in the history of the United States. Now, the second certificate that I'm going to talk about is the Lackawanna Railroad Company of New Jersey. Now, the reason I picked this second is because this is a fairly local company. This railroad operated in a small portion of New Jersey, part of Morris County, Sussex County, and Warren County, and a little bit of Pennsylvania near the Delaware Water Gap Bridge. So and the vignette on this certificate is a bridge that, in fact, there's a couple bridges that look pretty similar, but they still exist. It's a concrete bridge, and there's one just like it in Haynesburg, New Jersey, and there's also another one very similar on Route 80, about 3 miles before if you're in New Jersey, Route 80 in New Jersey, before you get to Pennsylvania by the Delaware Water Gap, and you can drive and see it today. And again, looking at the history, there are a lot of people who they're historians, local historians, and almost every town and every city in the country has like this. And these are wonderful people, and they study the history of the town and the place where they live. And if it weren't for these people, we wouldn't have any records of these areas. And if you put it all together, you get a great history of the whole country. And so this certificate was chosen because it represents a group of certificates collected by people who are very interested in local history, not so much national history, but local history. Now, the final certificate that I chose is this one. It's the Hudson and Manhattan Railroad. Now, I would call this regional importance, all right, because as opposed to the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, which affected the whole country, and the Lackawanna Railroad Company of New Jersey, which was just a small area, this railroad affected the region of New York City, that's the whole city itself, and New Jersey, and that would be any area close to New York City. Millions of people would be involved in this, and that would include anybody who commuted between New York and New Jersey to New York to get to work. Now, again, our company is called Bring Back the Memory, and I have a good memory of this. When I was very young, I lived in New York City. That's where I was born and raised in the Bronx, and my mother's family were all from Shenandoah, Pennsylvania, and we used to go and visit them a couple times a year, and we would take a bus from New York City out to Pennsylvania, and whenever we took the bus, we would pass underneath either the Lincoln Tunnel or the Holland Tunnel. And the thing I remember about it is, as I drove through the tunnel, of course I'm sitting in a bus, and just about when you got to the middle of the tunnel, you could see a dividing line, and on one side it said New York, and on one side it was New Jersey. And even as a little kid, that for some reason that fascinated me. And every time I drove to the tunnel, I was always looking for that sign that divided New York from New Jersey. Now let me just look at this, show you about this certificate, which is really great. The certificate, on the left-hand side, All right, this is the Hoboken Terminal. Now that existed today. Now it was kind of refurbished, but it's still there. Okay, so there's the Hoboken Terminal. On the right-hand side, you see New York City. That's fairly early in the 20th century. Up above here, you see the Hudson River. And on the Hudson River, you see several steamships which would pass. New York was a major seaport, so you would always have ships on the river. Now, underneath the river, right here, is a train passing through. And this train would hold millions of passengers. Every day people would go back and forth. I mean, New York City, the largest city in the United States, and over 7 million people population, and then you've got New Jersey, where a lot of these people live in New Jersey, and they go back and forth on this train, and they commute. So this is definitely one of my favorite stock certificates. Beautiful vignette, and anybody who wants to collect stock certificates, I would say this would be one that they definitely would want. So that's again, going back to, in summary, we talked about 3 companies. The first company would be Important Baltimore, Ohio, for anybody interested in national history, U.S. history. The second company, Lackawanna Railroad of New Jersey, would be somebody who is interested in local history. And the third company, Hudson and Manhattan Railroad Company, would be for someone who was interested in regional history, maybe anybody, and we're talking about millions of people who would commute back and forth to work using this. At one time in the early 20th century, this was called the tubes. So people would say, all right, let's take the tubes and go into work. Now it's a PATH, which is Port Authority Trans-Hudson, PATH, and but still, these trains still run. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe to our channel, Bring Back the Memory, and we'll have many future videos on collecting stock certificates and on collecting other items. Thanks for visiting. Bye.